Hello, first graders, and welcome back. This is week 4, day 5. For today's lesson, all you need is your thinking cap and your listening ears. Today, we're going to be starting by looking at page 3 from our text, Feathers Not Just for Flying. Listen as I read the text out loud. Feathers can warm like a blanket. On cold, damp days, a blue jay stays warm by fluffing up its feathers and trapping a layer of warm air next to its skin. On this page, we can see a little piece of a blanket. A blanket is a large piece of material that's used to keep us warm. I bet you have a blanket at home. Now, this says feathers can warm like a blanket. But are feathers really blankets? No. These aren't large pieces of material that keep us warm. But this writer is using a simile. Writers use similes. Read that word with me. Similes. Well, what is a simile? Our first line, feathers can warm like a blanket. That's a simile. You see, when writers compare one object to another, like a feather and a blanket, using the words like or as, we call that a simile. Writers use similes to better describe something. So on this page, the writer is comparing the blanket and the feather, using the word like. Feathers can warm like a blanket. There are a few similes throughout our text. You can even use similes when you're writing by comparing two objects, using the words like or as. Why do you think the author says feathers can warm like a blanket? I'll ask that again. Why do you think the author says feathers can warm like a blanket? That's right. People use blankets when they're cold, and birds get cold sometimes too, so they use their feathers to keep them warm. Sort of like how people use blankets to keep us warm. The author did some really great writing throughout our text, using crafts like similes. Our author also left us an author's note in the back of our text. What is an author's note? An author's note is a piece of writing often included in a text, and it tells us additional information to help the reader understand how and why the author wrote the text. I'm going to read the author's note. Try to follow along as I read. Author's note. While I was doing research for another book, I stumbled across a fascinating article in Birder's World, now Birdwatching magazine. It describes some of the amazing ways birds use their feathers. I knew this would be a great topic for a children's book, so I photocopied the article and pinned it to the idea board in my office. A few months later, I dug into the research. As I do for all of my books, I turned to 3 main sources for information: the library for books, magazines, and newspapers, the internet for journal articles and locating experts in the field, and my own nature journals. Some examples in this book are based on my personal observations in the natural world. Others come from interviews with scientists, as well as reports in scholarly books and scientific journals. For me, research is the easy part of a project. The hard part is figuring out the most interesting way to frame the material. I'm always asking myself, is there a way I can make this even more engaging? For this book, I spent 3 years tinkering with the text. I wrote countless drafts and did 4 complete overhauls before I finally latched on to the idea of comparing feathers to common objects in our lives. That's when the writing came to life, and I knew the manuscript was ready for my editor. Now, this sentence right in here that says, I wrote countless drafts and did 4 complete overhauls before I finally latched on to the idea of comparing feathers to common objects in our lives. Remember on this page, the author compared a feather to this common object, a blanket. Our author, throughout her author's note, told us that she was acting as a researcher. She did all of these things while researching to help write this text. So, how did this author, Melissa Stewart, research feathers for this text? What did she use? It tells you in this paragraph. Share your thinking. What did she use? That's right. She used books, magazines, newspapers, journal articles, experts in her own nature journals. She did a lot of work to help her research bird feathers. Today's learning target says, I can use text features to research information about feathers, using the text feathers not just for flying. Today, you're going to be a researcher, just like our author, Melissa Stewart. And you'll be using those text features to help you research information about feathers. Today, since we are answering this question, how do birds use their feathers to survive? Remember, that's our Unit 2 guiding question. We will be using this graphic organizer or this table to help us research. As we look through pages, we're going to think about how can we describe the feather? How does this feather help the bird survive? And then we'll put in a photograph example. Just like our author, we will be researching feathers. I'm going to model how to do the first page, this row. Then you'll step in to help me finish the table. Let's see. First, I need to closely look at my pages and read the text. Feathers can warm like a blanket. On cold, damp days, a blue jay stays warm by fluffing up its feathers and trapping a layer of warm air next to its skin. Then I can look down at my picture and see the blue jay. Blue Jay, Bradbury Mountain, Maine. How would I describe the feather? Let me think. I think I could say that this feather looks maybe soft, maybe fluffy. I'll put fluffy, soft, and warm because I know that it is like a blanket, so it has to be warm. And that helps me with my understanding of our next question. How does this feather help the bird survive? Well, I can tell that my bird here is in a cold environment. And if his feathers can warm like a blanket, then the feathers must help him keep warm. I'll put keeps the bird warm. And I'd like to put a blue jay, a real blue jay, as my photograph. Nod your head if you understand how we're going to use this table to help us keep track of our research of closely looking at the pages. Good. Let's go to the next one. Take a moment to closely look at the pages, and then I will read the text out loud. Listen as I read our text. Wood duck, Lake Badimji, Minnesota. Or cushion, like a pillow. A female wood duck lines her nest with feathers she plucks from her own body. These feathers cushion the duck's eggs and keep them warm. How would you describe the feather of the warm wood duck? Share your thinking. Good. I think I would describe it by saying comfortable, because it's a cushiony, pillowy feather. And what does this feather do to help the bird survive? Share your thinking. That's right. This feather lines the nest to keep the eggs warm. We can see it in this photograph or this picture on our text. Let's put a wood duck real photograph as our example. Good job. Let's look at our next one. I'll give you a moment to carefully and closely observe the pages. Listen as I read the pages aloud. Feathers can shade out sun like an umbrella. As a hungry tricolored heron wades through the water in search of food, it raises its wings high over its head. The feathers block out reflections from the sky and shade the water. This makes it easier to spot tasty fish and frogs. Tricolored heron, Florida, Everglades. How would you describe the feather of the heron? We could say that the feathers are big and wide. And how does this feather help the bird survive? It tells us right here. Share your thinking. We can say that the feathers block the sun so that the bird can see fish. You can see right here in the picture on the text that as the heron spreads its wings out, it blocks the sun. And the heron can look into the water, the shadowy water, and see the fish a little easier. Let's finish this row by adding a real photograph of a heron. Let's do the last row. I'll give you a moment to closely observe the pictures. Listen as I read the text aloud. Red-tailed hawk, Shiprock, New Mexico. Or protect skin like sunscreen. On sunny summer afternoons, red-tailed hawks spend hours soaring through the sky in search of prey. Their thick feathers protect their delicate skin from the sun's harmful rays. How would you describe the feather of the red-tailed hawk? Share your thinking. Good. Those are good describing words. I think I would say that these are thick feathers. I got that from our text. Their thick feathers protect their delicate skin from the sun's harmful rays. So, how does this feather, this thick feather, help the bird survive? Share your thinking. Mm-hmm. Good. I think that we could say that the feathers protects from the sun. The feather acts kind of like a sunscreen, protecting the red-tailed hawk as they spend hours soaring through the sky. Let's finish this row by putting in a real photograph example. There's a real red-tailed hawk. When I look at this completed chart that we've made together, I can more easily answer this question in blue at the top. Our question reads, how do birds use their feathers to survive? Well, here in the middle of our chart, we have 4 answers to that question. Birds use their feathers to survive by keeping warm, lining their nest to keep the eggs warm, blocking the sun so that they can see fish, and protecting them from the sun. Here are 4 different jobs that feathers do to help birds survive. Now, here's a question for you. Are these the only jobs that feathers can do? No way! Feathers have so many jobs that help them survive, that help the birds survive. These are just a few examples. Today's learning target said, I can use text features to research information about feathers. Using the text feathers not just for flying. Now, I forgot to mention that we really were using text features to help us research that information. We did find information about feathers, but we found all of this information inside of those text features, whether it was the heading, the text, the captions, or the photographs. Those text features helped us research our information about feathers. Thank you for joining me and doing such a good job researching, just like the author of our text, Melissa Stewart. Today, you do have independent work, but it's in a separate video. I'll see you next time. Bye, friends.